Going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sean Henderson, and I'm here with James Nally. James is in Southern California. I am in Texas, and this is the Evidence Show. So thanks for tuning in. We'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank you for being here. It was kind of fun. I think we had about 80 people sign up for this webinar in the last 2 days, which is fun. That's cool. It's also why I'm wearing a hat, because I didn't want the new people to see that I'm losing my hair. So you don't know that.
Me too.
So now, yeah, that's why we both wear hats. It might look a little unprofessional, but hey, we're in the comfort of our own homes and offices, so it'll have to be okay. But again, thank you for being here. I like to call people's attention to a couple of things before we get started. One is the community forum on Facebook. If you are a participant of the Facebook, then the community forum is a great place to get answers and kind of crowdsource solutions. We're working on ways to build community within the evidence management world any way that we possibly can. One of the ways that we're doing that is through a community group on Facebook. We're going to explore some other kind of community building strategies with another app that we're playing with, but I haven't figured it out yet, so can't tell you about it. But that's in the works, and we're also constantly on the lookout to help connect people into evidence associations. James is in California, where CAPE is an organization of prominence, and I am from Texas, where TAPE is a great state organization. But there are many, many states out there without representation, without advocates. And if you're in one of those states, we here at the Evidence Management Institute would like to help you start one. And we can give you details and information about that. It's been difficult during the pandemic, but then again, everything has. So we'll just start fresh in 2021. I also like to call your attention to our industry partnership with Tracker Products. We wouldn't be on the air. I guess we're not on the air. We're over the internets, coming to you electronically, and that's made possible by the folks at Tracker Products. I would highly recommend and strongly encourage you to check out their website and check out what they do. They do evidence management software, and there are folks there that would love to talk to you about evidence management. They do good work, so that's why we work together. If you're curious about what James and I do, you can look at our website at evidencemanagement.com. You'll find resources there that will hopefully help put you or point you in the right direction. We've got a body of standards and best practices. All this stuff is free and available to you online. There are lots of resources. Go to our website, check it out, see what you think. Hopefully you'll learn something. If not, let us know and we'll try to fix that. But those are the two things that I would like to call people's attention to first. So now we'll get started. This is the Evidence Show. It is a monthly show where we talk about evidence because it's the Evidence Show. I want to make sure now that everybody has a chance to be online. The main thing that we're going to be talking about today is a set of material specifications. Now, don't run away yet. I know that doesn't sound extremely exciting, but let me plead my case. But I want to make sure everyone has access and knows where to find the document that we'll be referring to. In your control panel, there is a PDF. It's called EMI Package Material Specs 2021.1. It's got an extremely long title. We condensed it to fit in the PDF spot. So download that file and you'll get a better idea of what we're talking about, because we're going to move fast through a lot of this material because we're not trying to cover it in this episode. We're trying to point you to a resource that you can refer back to at your leisure when you need it to make better decisions as an evidence manager for your property room. So our little tagline here is say hello to minimum specifications, say goodbye to rip bags, disintegrating tape, and unreadable labels. Those three things come from the devil, and we hate him. So we're trying to do away with those things. We're trying to see that rip bags and disintegrating tape and unreadable labels are a thing of the past because they fail to preserve evidence. They fail to keep evidence appropriately stored for the duration of its custody. And that's one of the things that we're looking at changing, and that's why we're talking about this today. So what are we talking about? Well, 5 things. The first thing we're going to talk about, we'll do some quick updates. We got some fun news coming up that we want to share with you first here on the Evidence Show, because, well, we just found out today on a lot of it, so that's really why. But we'll talk a little bit about escaping from insanity, and we'll talk a little bit about why evidence packaging fails, and then we'll make a case for minimum specifications for packaging, and we'll discuss those at length. If you have questions while we're talking, just put them in the chat window. James is going to help me kind of make sure that I'm seeing the questions and responding to the questions, and we'll both get to your answers as early and quickly as possible. We might cover some of them throughout the rest of the discussion. And I think my mouse just died. Okay, no, there we go. So, a few quick updates. We think this is fun stuff. Last month, those of you that were participated, we had an episode about just chiefs, executives, reaching police executives for to change the culture of evidence management. And part of that discussion, the purpose of that was to kind of crowdsource and bring ideas that we need to communicate to police chiefs. The first little foray into that, we'll be speaking at the CALIA virtual conference next week on March 24th. If you're a member of CALIA or if you're attending that conference, I'd encourage you to sign up for our class. But you're probably part of the choir, not the folks that we're trying to preach to. But I would encourage you or invite you to pay attention or watch that class and see what you think, because we've realized over time we love talking to evidence custodians. That's what we're about. That's what we're passionate about. We love teaching. We love consulting. But if we really want to change the culture, we got to start reaching police executives and agents of change. And so we're going to start kind of tailoring some classes and some specific learning and some strategies towards reaching police executives where we can get people on both ends. So we'll be there on March 24th. A lot of the input that you provided us or gave to us we'll be using in the class. And I've got to move that because I can't see. There we go. So next thing, and this is probably what I'm most excited about, and I think James is probably most excited about too, is that live training is officially alive again.
Yes.
Not unironically, the first class that we've got scheduled in 2021, we were waiting until mid-June to start doing classes again, is in Corona, California. It is not coronavirus, California, it is Corona, and it's Southern California. So I can't imagine a better place to start, maybe just a few miles on a beach somewhere, but I love going to California. And we will start there on June 21st. Not long after, we're going to do a class in Las Cruces, New Mexico. So if you can't make it to a California class, we're going to edge our way eastward into New Mexico, and that's where we will be on June 30th and July 1st. And then we're going to move to the Orlando area, Central Florida, in Oviedo, Florida, on July 13th and 14th. And we're going to go up to Jersey, home of Bruce Springsteen, September 1st and 2nd. We'll be in Wayne, New Jersey. And in September, we're going to be teaching at the IAPEM class in Chicago. That's at the end of September. That's a contract class, but if you're in IAPEM, please sign up. And if you'd like to attend our class, we will be there. Our goal in 2021, because we didn't start our schedule until June, normally we start it right about now, February, March. But we're going to try to do at least 15 classes this year. That's a lot to pack into the last half of the year, but we're going to see what we can do. We're currently planning on some classes in Texas and a couple more in California, and I'm working on one in Indiana. We've got classes in the works, but if you're interested in having us come to your area, we would love to visit with you about that. We've still got, probably 10 spots up in the air, and wherever we fill them first, that's where we're going to go. So on with the rest of the show. I'm going to talk a little bit about escaping from insanity. When you see the same problems over and over and over again, and you respond the same way to them over and over and over again, clinically, that's a definition of insanity. And I find as I visit with more evidence custodians, as I do more consulting work, as I teach more classes in this field, I see the same things over and over and over again. And, rip bags that rip, tape that yellows and cracks, evidence labels that fall off onto the floor, become detached from packages, location labels that just peel and wither away, guns that poke through bags, evidence labels that just completely fade into nothingness, where they're absolutely illegible or unreadable. And when you see the same thing over and over and over again, at some point, if you don't just go insane, it's important to ask why. And then it's even better to actually do something. So we want to talk a little bit about the only chain in the evidence management world that actually needs to break. We don't want our chain of custody to break. We don't want breaks in our security protocols. We want to break up the supply chain because we've got to do something. And I'm convinced that what we're talking about today is going to go a long way towards a building block or a foundation that we can build on for better evidence management practices across the board. So, why does evidence packaging fail? There are probably three primary reasons why evidence packaging fails. And I would kind of categorize it. I'd say that evidence fails at the poverty line. There are three reasons why evidence packaging usually fails, and they're a result of three things: poor policy and procedures, poor accountability, and poor packaging products. Um, those
And
three
money.
reasons, well, resources, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, those three reasons account for probably 90% of packaging failures. And I think it's important to take a look at those and pick one. And that's what we're doing today. Today, we're picking one of those three sources, and we're going to take a look at it and see what can be done to change there. Because I think that there is room for improvement. And even with, James just mentioned money, and that's usually a huge source of, it's just budgets are a source of problem. Finding money to buy things. But I think we can make a business case for minimum specs that will fit within the context of a budget discussion. And I'll try to explain that next. But I couldn't get any coffee in me, so now I'm better. So most packaging or many packaging failures, they fail at the point of purchase. Before an officer has a chance to screw something up in the field, that's probably someone wanting to sell me a warranty on a car that I don't have anymore. So they fail at the point of purchase before an officer ever has a chance to screw something up in the field, and they will. Um, it fails actually before that many times. And one of the reasons for that is in all the literature and all the training classes that I've been a part of or I could find, there's never been kind of universal guidance or quality recommendations for packaging items or packaging materials that work. And I thought to myself, you teach classes, why don't you do something about that? And that's what we're doing today. And my line of reasoning kind of follows this. If you ask someone for a bag, they're probably going to give you a bag. If you're an evidence custodian and you want to order 1,000 bags, they're probably going to give you 1,000 bags. Now, that also probably means if you just ask for 1,000 bags, they're going to give you the cheapest 1,000 bags that they can possibly provide. They're going to look for the 1,000 bags that will get your needs met, or at least the express needs that you've made met, and move on to the next thing. But I'm convinced that just asking for 1,000 bags is not the right question. And a lot of times we don't know what the right question to ask is because we've never thought about bags. And it's okay that you've never thought about bags. It's a weird thing to think about. It's something that I do in my office. I sit and I think about bags. I think about tape. I think about barcode labels. Somebody's got to do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be you. But the important thing is that you ask for the right bag that meets your needs based on industry standards. And if you do that, you just might get the bag that you need that's not going to rip on you when you pick it up off the shelf. And that's kind of the premise that we're working on today. We're trying to give people a resource to where not only you don't just ask for a bag, you're asking for a specific bag or a bag that meets certain criteria. a bag that is going to be designed and intended to last for the full duration of custody, whatever item is inside of it. And if you haven't thought about bags a lot, these are some of the things we would ask you to think about. So that's what we came up with. And this is an extremely long title. I'm a fan of extremely long titles. The Evidence Management Institute Packaging Materials Minimum Product Specifications Guide, version 2021.1. Now, we have an extremely long title. I like to shorten it to EMI just because I'm tired of saying all those words. But really what we're talking about is a granular look at evidence labels and seals, craft bags, craft paper, cardboard boxes, paper envelopes, polytubing, resealable plastic bags, packaging tape, warning labels, hazard labels, and we'll take a look at specialty packing. And the reason that we're doing that is because those 8 categories comprise probably 99% of all evidence packaging in our industry. So the goal here is to give you specific guidance and to give you specific information on the types of labels and seals that you need to be using, the type of craft bags and craft paper that are useful and appropriate for packaging evidence. Now, we're not going to go over this document exhaustively today. It's really to introduce you to that document. So if you haven't downloaded it from the handouts section, please do so, take advantage of it. But we're going to get into some of the weeds here in just a second. Now, if you open up the document, one of the first things that we talk about are evidence labels and evidence seals. And there is information, we tried to structure it to where we give you specific advice without recommending specific products. You can get markers from anywhere, but it's important that whatever markers you buy have certain characteristics. We prefer for evidence seals markers with permanent ink that have a fine point on them. You don't want to use the same markers that cheerleaders use to make banners, although they might not even do that anymore. But you want to use markers with a fine point so that the words that you inscribe on that label are actually legible and don't look like they're written by a kindergartner. You want to use permanent ink because that record, that seal, is part of the chain of custody of that item, and we'll follow it from submission through disposition. So we don't want people using pencil or ballpoint pen or dry erase board markers for evidence seals. We want them using permanent ink. Same thing when we look at evidence label printers. Many people have not thought too much about evidence label printers like barcode label printers in their lives, and that's okay too. But we recommend thermal transfer label printers for a very specific purpose. Now, I've talked to printer manufacturers that claim that direct thermal printers will do the same thing. I just haven't seen it, and they haven't called me back. But there's 2 things that are important about a barcode label printer. One, that it's a thermal transfer printer, means it has a little ribbon in it, and that it's got sufficient resolution to print a barcode label that is legible. At least 300 dpi is a good resolution for a barcode label printer. Higher is better. More resolution is always good. So these are the kind of granular things that we're digging into in this minimum specs guide, so that when you go to your police purchasing whoever and ask for a label printer, they don't just get you the cheapest label printer that money can buy, something that they would print receipts on at a grocery store, which is they're designed to just fade instantly upon printing. You need to be able to communicate to them what type of label printer you need and the specifications of that label printer so that you get the actual product that works for you and your agency. When it comes to evidence labels and seals, we recommend specific materials for evidence labels. If you're using paper for evidence labels, they will fail you. At some point in the future, they will absolutely fail. We recommend synthetic surfaces like polypropylene, polyolefin. Anything with the word poly in it is usually a good synthetic label surface for labels. And we recommend permanent adhesive. Now, you wouldn't think that you would have to ask for these 2 things, but labels have all kinds of different properties. And if you just look at Zebra's website, you can find hundreds and hundreds of different labels. And I'm sure every label manufacturer has other hundreds of labels that you can choose from. So the 2 things that you have to look for is a synthetic surface like polypropylene and a permanent adhesive, something that's designed to adhere that label to whatever it's stuck to forever, or for at least as long as it's uh, in your custody. Now, polypropylene labels and permanent adhesives, that combination of labels is used to label oil field pipe here in Texas, and it is designed to stick and stay there for the duration of the time that it is out in the field. That's the type of durability that we're looking for, that you need in your evidence room. Because if you're storing something outside in an offsite storage, which that's another discussion, but if you're storing something outside or exposed to the elements or not in temperature controlled setting, you want a label that's going to be durable under those storage conditions. If you're putting something in a freezer or a refrigerator, you need a label that's going to stand up to the storage conditions inside that refrigerator or that freezer. For that reason, we recommend synthetic labels with permanent adhesives. And the other little fun thing is the ribbon. Now I've got props here, but they're not very exciting. So I was reluctant to show them to you because this just looks like a tiny roll of empty toilet paper and a tiny roll of black toilet paper, but it's not. It's actually barcode ribbon stuff. And this is a wax ribbon from a manufacturer here locally. Um, but wax resin or full resin ribbons are the materials that you need to print the labels that you need for maximum legibility and durability. So ain't this exciting? Isn't this how you wanted to spend your Thursday? I am captivated. I'm going to look and see if there are, oh wow, there are actually more people here. So that's a good thing. Um, I will tell you, I don't want to make you feel guilty, but I do get sad when I see those numbers just drop away in the middle. That hurts my feelings, and they just that's hurtful. So let's move on to the next thing. Craft bags and craft paper. A bag is not just a bag. Um, a bag is very different. There can be very huge or very wide differences between bags. So we recommend three different sizes of bags. Now, they don't have to be this specific size. In fact, it's very unlikely that they will be precisely a number 8 lunch bag. The idea is to get you to think about three different sizes of bags that work for your agency. Something small, something medium, and something large. Now, lunch size bags, those are commonly available, but if you just buy a lunch bag, it's probably made with a really light paperweight, because a lunch sack is designed for a kid or some, I guess it could be a grown up, to take to school and sling around and throw away within a couple of hours. That's not how evidence packages are intended or designed. So we need something stronger and more durable. It's just to get you an idea of the size that we're talking about. A medium-sized bag, a 1/6 barrel bag. I've got one right here. Since we're using props, this is going to be exciting. I've never done this much live action work before. This is a grocery sack. It's a 1/6 barrel bag. It's about that large. And I recommend a large size bag. Most of us use 30-gallon lawn bags, but James, tell them what y'all use in Orange County, the large
Yeah,
bags.
so a few years ago, we actually, it's been, 20 years. We've come across a product that we use, which is a double line paper, heavy duty craft paper bag. And I don't have any endorsements except to say that it's the best bag that's ever been made in the history of mankind. But the company's called Portco, and I believe they're out of Washington. And it's marketed as a refuge bag for like leaves and dirt, and that's why they call it an earth bag. But we commonly refer to it as a narc bag because large quantities of narcotics like bales of marijuana, kilos, whatever, fit really perfect inside, and it gives the ability to hold its shape and roll the bag down. And over the years, we've had very few that have torn on us and gotten dilapidated. They hold their shape really well. That's my contribution.
And that's a little bigger than like the lawn bags that you find at like Home Depot or Lowe's. It's a little bit bigger size, isn't it? Okay.
Yes, it is.
So, we're not saying you got to get a 30-gallon lawn bag. What we're espousing or what we're endorsing is that you have a large size bag, whether it's a bag like James is talking about or a 30-gallon lawn bag. They're just common sizes. Something large to put things in. With all of your packaging selections, the most important thing, or the two important things that we want to talk about, is that one, they meet and are kind of tailored to match your storage shelving, and two, They meet and match the most common types of evidence that you receive as an agency. There are agencies out there of all different types. Not all of them receive the same types of evidence. So you might have no need for a lawn bag. Uh, if you don't buy a bunch of lawn bags. But the goal here is to get people to consider their storage needs and their storage equipment when they make these packaging decisions, because they all work together. Now, when it comes to minimum specs for a craft bag or for craft paper, and we'll talk about craft paper in just a second, we recommend an absolute minimum of a 50-pound basis weight for your craft bags. A little lunch sack, a little flimsy lunch sack is probably 35 pounds, and it will rip clean in two as soon as you put something heavy in it. I actually prefer 60 pounds or heavier when it comes to basis weight for bags. Now, basically, that's just the weight of the paper. This bag is a 75 pound. I don't know if you can see it. I'm not a good cameraman. 75 pounds. So this bag is going to hold a lot of stuff. It's going to be extremely durable. It's not going to rip through the bottom because it's a heavy bag. It's made of heavyweight paper. If you buy a cheap bag that's like 20-pound paper or 35-pound paper, you can bet that that's going to rip through immediately and make you say bad things. So when it comes to sealing and label considerations, we recommend that you seal bags with packaging tape. Please do not seal bags with tamper evident tape, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Tamper evident tape, unless it's specially designed for package sealing, was never intended to seal a package, to mechanically close a package. We recommend using packaging tape, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, to seal bags. And then we would also further encourage you to be consistent in the way that you place labels on your bags. We recommend that you have a label that faces the access side of your shelf or your storage area so that people can see what's in it without moving stuff around. We'll move on to craft paper. Craft paper comes in rolls typically. It doesn't really matter how wide a roll that you buy or how long the roll is. Craft paper is used for wrapping, especially biological evidence or large format evidence that needs to be protected from cross-contamination. This needs to be a really thick paper, typically, especially if you're going to protect things from cross-contamination or damage. We recommend a minimum of 60-pound basis weight craft paper, or 75-pound basis weight craft paper is actually better. It's thicker, it's better for that purpose. It's still foldable, it still can conform to different non-standard shapes, but it's going to be strong enough and thick enough to protect the item that that's wrapped inside it. We have any questions so far? Chats? This is a very quiet group.
There's a couple,
Oh,
but I'm taking care of some of them
oh
here.
man, I was looking at the wrong place when I was looking at asking where people are coming from. So thank you for putting that in there. I just was looking at the wrong place entirely. So cool. Someone from Galveston. We need to become friends. I love the coast, and that's the closest coast to me. Uh, James might not be proud of it, but I love Texas coastline.
Oh, it's
Uh,
beautiful. South Padre, can't beat that.
when it comes to, well, you can.
Yeah,
He's
not
lying
that
to
I
my
can,
face. He lives
but
about 20 miles from pristine, sandy beaches. But that's a discussion for another day. When it comes to cardboard boxes, I mean, material specifications for cardboard boxes are pretty simple. We recommend 3 sizes of cardboard boxes. We recommend that you select those sizes based on your needs and the shelving that you have at your agency. But there's really only one thing to keep in mind when it comes to purchasing cardboard boxes. We recommend single wall construction that's rated at 200 psi burst strength. And basically, a box like that is going to be strong enough to put anything in it that you would typically want to put in a box. Now, if for some reason you have a need for heavier items or higher rated boxes, they exist. They're more expensive. But typically, a 200-pound burst, a 200 psi burst rated box is going to hold almost everything that you possibly need. Um, we're not going to make specific size recommendations. I wouldn't recommend the 4x4 box for evidence packaging. I just bought this to use as an example, and it packs nicely in my little training kit. But small boxes, medium-sized boxes, large boxes, indexed to your shelving needs, that's kind of what we're recommending. So let's keep trucking here because it's, oh wait, we got time. When it comes to paper envelopes, and I think we're in agreement on this one. I hate small envelopes. They just get lost. So for me, when I mentioned small, medium, and large, but what I really mean is just medium and large. Um, Small envelopes just have a way of falling into holes, black holes, places where matter just disappears and is never seen again. And that starts at the 4x6 size points. I recommend 6x9 envelopes and either a 9x12 or 10x13, depending on the way that your agency organizes your shelves. I recommend those two sizes. Almost everything that needs to go in an envelope can go in one of those two envelope sizes. Now, when it comes to minimum specs, these paper envelopes that we're talking about are very similar. They're craft paper envelopes, very similar in material to bags and craft paper, manila envelopes, which is also kind of a version of craft paper. There's only real two things to really think about here when it comes to purchasing paper envelopes, and these are minor recommendations. One is to look at the closures on the bag and look at the seams on the bag. The closures that come on paper envelopes, there are usually 4 or 5 different types. There's the little clasp, little hole with it that's reinforced, that has little 2 brads that stick through and cut your fingers when you're playing with the envelopes. The other is the hook and loop that's got a little piece of string dangling down from it. And then you've got gummed envelopes and self-adhesive envelopes. We recommend, or I recommend, either the self-adhesive or a gummed envelope. You don't need the little string. It's just, it adds bulk to the package over time. Same thing with the brad. There's no probative or forensic value to sealing something in that, and you're adding metal and additional materials that don't need to be in your evidence package. Ideally, just an ungummed envelope would be perfect, but they typically don't sell those in commercially available applications. But those are some things that I would think about. Another thing to think about is just the seams, the quality of the seams used to construct that envelope. If you buy a low quality envelope where the seams are just kind of falling apart during the manufacturing process, then you're going to have to seal every single seam in order to keep your evidence preserved and intact. If you buy quality envelopes, and James was talking about something that Orange County is doing or working with a company to try to figure out. Tell us about that.
So when you put the envelopes together, we use the 6x9, 9x12 manila envelopes with the tag facing forward. You're always left with the seal or the flap on the bottom, and it seems like every time you go to pull one envelope out, it catches on that flap on the item in front of it or behind it, and over time it can tear that flap apart and create a breach in a separate piece of evidence, or even the evidence that you were trying to pull out of the box. So we thought it would be novel to try and create an envelope that has a fold at the bottom, so there's no flap or anything for the next piece of property to get caught or stuck on. So that's in the works too. Maybe once it becomes a reality, I'll be able to take some pictures of it and put it on the evidence management Facebook. And if the people are interested in it, then you'll have access to it.
Very cool. Thanks,
Does that make
James.
any sense? Does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
I don't have my little envelopes like you to show the bottom of it and so forth, but I think we get the picture, right?
Yeah, I think we got it. And you could have. I mean, you could. I tell you what, you could broadcast from him, and you could have a box from a previous episode to hold and an unair conditioned office. I have to turn the air conditioner down so that I can hear myself think. We're just peeling back the curtain for you out there in the
Yeah.
audience, so you'll know more and more about us. Uh, so when it comes to paper envelopes, 2 sizes is perfect. I think 6x9, 9x12. I think James would agree. If you really
Yes.
want to use a small envelope, if you just feel that compulsion to use a small envelope, please don't go any further than 4x6, unless you've got uh, very nimble fingers and a very well ordered and well structured organization system. When it comes to sealing considerations, I recommend sealing even paper envelopes with packaging tape. Um, in my youth, the first time that I started, with my first week in the evidence unit, when I was assigned to the evidence unit, the thing that I thought was the coolest, I mean, the absolute pinnacle of cool, was the tamper tape, because it looked so official. It looked so cool. And like I felt better than other people because I had access to this tape. I soon learned to hate it with the white hot intensity of 1,000 suns when I tried to peel a piece of it off and I couldn't get off my fingers, and then I couldn't get off my uniform, and then I couldn't get off my pants. So I hate tamper tape now, sort of. It has a
We feel you,
purpose,
Sean. We feel
but
you.
it's not the end all be all. Packaging tape is a great seal for envelopes, bags, and boxes. You don't seal these things with tamper tape because that's not what it's designed for. So I'll get off of that soapbox and talk for a minute about polytubing and resealable plastic packaging. Now, I didn't put pictures of polytubing or resealable plastic packaging on here because I think these come from the devil. And that's not precisely true. Polytubing has its place. If you're packaging narcotics or fentanyl, you absolutely want to put that stuff inside of plastic packaging to protect you, protect your unit, protect the lab, protect everyone from the hazardous potential of these types of substances. But I have seen polytubing used so often and applied so broadly in so many different places that it shouldn't be, that it's very difficult for me to be an advocate for it. When it comes to size considerations, the one thing I would recommend, I was recently working with an agency here in the great state of Texas, and they had like a 12-inch roll of polytubing, and it was like 2 mils thick. And they had a sealer, a heat sealer that was 8 inches wide. Well, you can't seal a 12-inch roll of polytubing with an 8-inch wide heat sealer. So whatever roll size of heat sealer or whatever roll size of polytubing you use, make sure that you've got a matching width heat sealer in order to get the job done. Now, when it comes to polytubing, the other thing that is really, really critically important, and I can't underscore this enough, if you're going to use polytubing, and you're going to use it for the actual benefits that it has to protect you from bad things, you need to use thick 4 mil polytubing at an absolute minimum. If you really want to use quality polytubing that's going to protect you, I recommend 6 mil polytubing. Now, 4 mil and 6 mil doesn't mean 4 millimeters or 6 millimeters. I am not good at math, and I learned that just a few weeks ago. It means 4/1000ths of an inch and 6/1000ths of an inch. And that's hard to say with a dry mouth. So 4 mil polytubing is okay. It's appropriate. I see so many agencies out there using 2 mil or even 1 mil, like little flimsy bags, and their heat sealers, and the heat sealers just chop right through the labels. They don't seal it at all. They just destroy it. 6 mil is really great material to use for that. We recommend also at the Evidence Management Institute that polytubing and resealable plastic tubing is used as a secondary packaging method. And we spell out in the guide reasons for that. But polytubing is difficult to file in consecutive order. It has no structure. It's like a person without a skeleton. They just kind of fold over. There's no way to organize polytubing in an easy manner. And it's very difficult for labels or sealing materials to adhere to the surface of polytubing. For that reason, we recommend that polytubing and resealable plastic packaging be used to seal envelopes or to seal evidence items, but that those items be placed inside of a traditional package like a bag or an envelope or a box, and that box is sealed and used and labeled as your evidence package. The best application for polytubing that I've found is as a secondary packaging method for hazardous materials, not as a primary packaging method. If you package things in plastic, um, the seals are going to rub off, the labels are going to slough off. Even if you use a high speed, low drag, permanent adhesive and a polypropylene label, there is every likelihood that due to the nature of the surface of that polytube, it's gonna slough off. During the manufacturing process for polytubing, there are lubricants that are used to keep the package from sticking to itself. They don't remove that stuff during the manufacturing process. It's used to keep the stuff slick and keep it rolling. That's one of the reasons why your labels fall off. That's one of the reasons why you write your name in Sharpie on it and it brushes against your pants and it falls away. So for that reason, we recommend using it as a secondary packaging option. As far as sealing considerations and label considerations, if you are going to use polytubing as a primary package method, you need to make darn sure that you find a label that is constructed to stick to poly polypropylene plastic. That is not a commonly available item. There are plastic on plastic adhesives out there, but chances are it's probably a different configuration chemically than a label that would work easily on paper or cardboard boxes or other substrates. For that reason, we recommend using polytubing as for hazardous evidence. Now, there are some very specific prohibitions, some reasons why you would never use polytubing or resealable plastic. And as you can tell, as a test question, I left that blank on purpose because I pay attention to these when I create them, and I would never make a mistake on my own. But there are some things that you don't want to do with polytubing. You don't want to put biological evidence in polytubing. You don't want to put metallic evidence in polytubing. You don't want to put things that are sharp. What else do we not want to put in polytubing?
Wet marijuana.
Yeah, anything wet, anything with any moisture whatsoever, anything that's going to be subject to temperature changes, you don't want those things going into polytubing because polytubing becomes a mold factory. It becomes a factory of decay. You don't want to put firearms in plastic tubing or inside plastic. They will rust almost immediately upon submission if they're placed in plastic. That's how you create rust, and you don't want to do that typically. Now, when it comes to tape, this is one of my favorite things, and James and I were talking about this last night. And even since we were talking, I've kind of went back and forth because I'm a huge fan of using quality tape, but it's difficult to figure out what quality tape means because most of us never look into this. And I've been looking into it for a number of years, and I still haven't completely settled. But there are two different types of tape adhesives out there. So let's talk about minimum specs for packaging tape. There's a difference between packaging tape and shipping tape. Packaging tape is thicker. Packaging tape is more durable. Packaging tape usually comes in industrial and economy configurations. You want the industrial. 2-inch width for packaging tape is usually sufficient. 3-inch width becomes cumbersome and difficult to deal with, but a 2-inch wide packaging tape is a great option. We prefer clear polypropylene as a packaging tape, but here are the important factors to consider. When it comes to material thickness, we recommend 2.5 mils as a minimum thickness for packaging tape. 3.03 mil is great, but you want a tape that is thick because it's got to support an adhesive that's going to be thick as well. And when it comes to adhesive, you have two basic choices, and both of them come with trade-offs. There is no perfect tape. If you're storing everything at temperature controlled setting or in temperature controlled conditions, chances are you can get away with either one and be fine. But for long-term storage, for evidence, if you store things in different temperature settings or different temperature controls, it's important to look at this little matrix, and you'll also find it in just lost the ability to speak, minimum specs guide. For strong adhesion and initial tack, hot melt adhesives are great. Unfortunately, hot melt adhesives, as great as they are in the short term, can yellow over time. They can break down under UV exposure. They're not as great for long-term storage. They're not great if you're going to put them in extreme temperature settings. Like if you're putting something in frozen storage, a hot melt adhesive doesn't do nearly as well as an acrylic adhesive. Now, another thing that's nice about hot melt adhesives is that it comes off the roll really nicely. I don't know if you have ever experienced this like I have when you're trying to peel a piece of tape off of a roll and it just comes off in little shreds. That's maddening. That's probably an acrylic combination tape that you're dealing with. Um, Hot melt adhesive actually has a releasing agent on it that makes it come off the roll easier. This is probably too much information. No one wants to talk about tape this much, but make your own decision based on that matrix. Um, Hot melt is extremely, it's got a lot of holding power. It's a high shear tape. It's not going to rip on you, but it's also not going to last as long. And at acrylic adhesives, the quality of that seal actually gets better the longer it sits on that package. So there are good points and bad points. The bottom line is use the one that's right for your agency and your storage environment. Um, and at temperature controlled settings, both of them will perform admirably for you, uh, as long as you get a tape that's thick enough to hold the package together. Now, when it comes to tamper tape,
True.
I got 3 recommendations that we make for tamper tape. One, that it has a high adhesion factor. The fact that it sticks to your fingernails and comes off in little shreds, that's actually a good thing. You want it to be a high adhesion tape that sticks to everything immediately. Tamper tape, that's what it's designed for. You want it to stick immediately and you want it to rip off in those little shreds and ribbons. You want to know immediately if someone has tampered with that package. That's the whole value of tamper tape. But as such, it's very difficult to work with. It's very frustrating. It's never, ever intended to mechanically seal a package. Please don't use tamper tape to seal a bag because it
Yeah.
doesn't seal bags. It will just rip open probably 20 minutes after it sets in storage, just from the weight of the paper relaxing itself. It will tear the bag apart. The split back recommendation related to tamper tape, that's really more preference than anything. But if you have ever put a length of tamper tape on an item and have it curl up on you or stick to itself or made you say very bad words, uh, which has happened to me a lot. I found that split back tapes lower my blood pressure. They make me feel better about me and they help me get the job done and with a much lower threshold for frustration. So I would strongly recommend those split back tapes. It's just a better design all the way around. Now, tamper tape is a great secondary seal or an optional seal on standard packaging. It can also be a great primary seal on specialty packaging. There are certain types of packages out there that lend themselves well to using tamper tape as a seal, but not all. So I would just look at that on a case by case basis and make your decisions from there. When it comes to hazard or warning labels, and we're going to wrap things up here in about 2 minutes so we can get to any questions if there are any. Um, we recommend for packages that contain hazardous materials or biological evidence or anything that requires special handling, put a large label on it so people know what to do with it. They need to be big enough to see and easy to understand for anybody. The dumbest person in your agency needs to be able to go into your evidence vault and know not to touch that big bag with the biohazard sticker on it, or at least not to stick their hand inside the package because there's something bad there. Um, and if they do, that's really on them. It shouldn't, but it should be large enough and conspicuous enough for everyone to be able to see. When it comes to hazard labels or package labels, we still make the same recommendations that use synthetic labels with permanent adhesive because I've seen tons and tons of biohazard labels just slough off of packages. And if it sloughs off the package, then the warning is gone. So put them in a conspicuous place. I love multiple labels. I would rather you have 5 biohazard labels on a box or a bag. I would pay out of my pocket rather than to reach into that bag at a later date when disposing of the evidence and find a dried up bloody shirt. So the more, the merrier. If you get in trouble for putting too many biohazard stickers on a package, you can have your supervisor email me directly and I will beg for clemency on your behalf. Um, we recommend warning labels on biohazard, biological evidence, fentanyl or hazardous narcotic evidence, chemical hazards, fragile items, items that are heavy, it's nice to get a heads up, know that something's heavy before you pick it up and throw your back out. I would even recommend lithium battery labels, unsafe firearm labels. Not every firearm that comes into our storage area is going to be safe, even though that's a standard and a best practice. But if you've got a firearm that's recovered in a lake by a dive team, they don't unload the firearm before it's examined. They put it in water in a paint can and they seal the paint can, and that's what you get. So an unsafe firearm label might be something that your agency might invest in. It's hopefully not something that you use all the time, but certainly not out of the realm of possibility. Then hazmat placard labels are fun to have around too. Now here is the bad news. When it comes to specialty packaging, we wanted to make note of it, excuse me, but we didn't have time to make specific recommendations. Generally, we love the idea of specialty packaging for handgun boxes and long gun boxes, even knife boxes or SANE or sexual assault evidence kits. These are non-standard packages that we see commonly. SANE kits, paint cans, the plastic jars that use to collect liquid evidence. And let's hope we don't have too much of that. Faraday bags for mobile devices, sharps containers. A lot of these are non-standard. But we encourage the use and adoption of those for those specific applications. We'll continue to work on this document and improve it over time and come up with better specifications and more information for you. But we just wanted to include those in this particular release and let you know we haven't forgotten about it. We're working on it. But that's kind of the Cliff Note version of that guide. So is anybody have any questions before
Hey,
we kick
Sean.
off here? Yes.
Sean, Bree Wagner was asking for your recommendation on packaging computers. I'm assuming like desktops and so forth. And I know at our agency, we really are just concerned about the information inside the computer. So we would use like a standard packaging tape and seal that tape on the outside to any panel or access door that would allow someone to get into that computer. What's your thoughts on that?
It really kind of depends on why you've taken the computer in. You know, is it and what type of case it is. I'm not a huge fan. I wouldn't encase a CPU or a laptop in plastic because plastic is a bad environment for any electronic device because it collects moisture and gathers moisture. What you're doing is great. I mean, if you have to package it in something, I would package it in a craft bag or craft paper.
Sure.
If it's got probative biological evidence attached to it or on it or smeared on it somewhere, then absolutely wrap it in craft packaging. It really depends on the type of evidence that's inside it. If it's strictly digital evidence and digital information that you're after, then a seal on the panel, a seal on the back panel to ensure that no one's accessed it is great and sufficient. If it's biological evidence or other probative evidence, I would wrap it in craft packaging.
Very cool.
Anybody else? Let me look through.
Here's the last one that we have from Rosa McNeely. She's asking, where do you recommend to purchase biohazard labels?
You know, I don't know of I wouldn't recommend a specific vendor, but I would look for and I would call their customer service people. I mean, you can get them anywhere. You can get them from Len Peavy. You can get them from any forensic place like Arrowhead or Searchy. You can get them from Uline. You can buy them off of the internet a dozen different places. But regardless of where you buy them from, the one thing that you want to make sure before you purchase them is are they manufactured with a permanent adhesive that's not going to come off the package, and is it printed on a piece of paper or is it printed on a piece of synthetic label stock? So if you satisfy those two things, it really doesn't matter where you get them from. They're available widely from a number of different sources, but check those two things. Is it synthetic? Is it permanent adhesive? If you check those two boxes, go for it.
Right. Also, another question from Kim Otero. If we're stuck using poly tubing, can we poke tiny holes in the bag to release the air that has taken up all of the room on the shelf? That's a pretty good question.
This is a great question. And it brings to mind the reason that I first fell in hate with polytubing so many years ago. Because we had a person that I worked with that literally would roll out like 12 feet of polytubing, seal one end, take a little one-hitter marijuana pipe, blow the bag up to its full capacity, toss the thing in there and seal the other side, to where we're literally making 12-foot body pillows for one-hitter marijuana pipes. And that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much. Now, there's two real questions before I would make any blanket statement. And James, see if you agree with me. It depends on the type of evidence that you're storing inside that polytubing. Hopefully, it's not biological evidence to begin with, because there's no business use case that would support that. But if you poke a hole in the polytubing, it kind of negates the whole purpose of the polytubing to begin with. So I wouldn't just say a blanket yes, but if you're storing things of no probative forensic value and you're trying to remove the air from it, what you might do is send it back to the officer, have them excise a hole in it, and then reseal it and push all the air out. That would probably be the best case, is to have the officer repackage it and remove the air. Before you do that, it would probably be best to write into your procedures and policies a guideline or a requirement that they don't package air, because we've got plenty of that. That's something that you would want to write into your procedures and then hold them accountable for in the future. But just poking a hole on your own, I would be very reluctant to do that unless you're covered and protected by a policy or procedure that governs that.
Yeah. We have time for another one. We got Mark McMullen. Says he's asking, is best practice to use tamper resistant tape, or is the packaging tape with the date initials, would that be sufficient for what's required?
Yeah, see if you agree with me, James.
Yeah.
But I have no problem using packaging tape and sealing packaging tape with a permanent marker with date and initials. That is perfectly fine and perfectly acceptable.
I think the key to that is teaching your guys and girls, ladies and men, how to put the date and time and their initials in that correct section. What we like to do is half on, half off the tape, and that actually does create a tamper-proof seal, because obviously, if at any time the tape were to be removed, you'd still be able to see half of the sealing area. So it's just a matter of retraining some of your staff on the best practice, that process of putting the initials across the tape so that it's half on, half off.
100% agree with you, James. And I mean, the longer I've been doing this and the more that I'm exposed to different ways of doing things in different agencies, I am 100% in favor of just not using tamper evident tape except when you absolutely have to. I love the way tamper evident tape looks. It looks really, really cool, but it really doesn't provide, if you use the right kind of tape and the right kind of packaging, it doesn't provide as much security as the tape itself. And it's been used so inappropriately to physically close packages in the past that I've seen so many packages just pop open, covered like a Christmas tree in tamper tape. So, that's, you don't need it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Or if there are agencies that really prefer the tamper tape, I would just make a recommendation that you'd still put your clear tape over that as a secondary adhesion to ensure that the flap doesn't open up and breach that package.
Absolutely. We got two more questions here. I think we've got time for them. They're both relatively easy questions to answer, from John up in Gainesville, Texas. It's about Texas DPS's crime lab. Will they accept a package with packaging tape? Absolutely. Unequivocally, yes, especially if it's sealed appropriately. The folks at the crime lab, I'm not sure where you go. If you go to Garland, check with them, consult with them first. But yeah, I don't know that DPS has ever had an issue with packaging tape sealed items. And then the question, how do you seal evidence that's found popped open in storage with no sign of tampering?
That's
That's
a
a
good
great
one.
question. Yeah. And the best probably answer is not the answer that people want to hear. I think, and James, we'll see what you think, but
Absolutely.
I think that if you find a bag that's popped open, if you're a squared away evidence operation that's on top of things, you want to find out why. So rather than just saying, I'll just take it back and throw a piece of tape on it, let's find out why. Because a bag that's open is an out of place thing. It's an anomaly. It's something that should catch our attention and make us go, why has this happened? So I think you would want to investigate the why and try to figure it out. You would also want to cover yourself and cover your agency, because it's not whether we make mistakes or whether things break or whether things go wrong. It's how do we handle ourselves and how transparently do we handle our operations when things do go wrong. And an open, unsealed package in your evidence room, especially one that's been sealed, is a thing that goes wrong. And so, one, I would say you would want to have a policy or procedure that you would follow that would govern what you do there. I would recommend that policy or procedure require you to remove the item from storage to figure out as best you can is what happened. If you've got video, do some research, conduct some research on why that happened. See if it's a failure of packaging, see why the failure occurred, and then address the issue and reseal it. It sounds like a pain for something so simple, but with that level of attention paid to that item and that issue, it really communicates that your agency is trying to do their level best to make sure that evidence is stored and stays stored appropriately for the duration of its custody. James, do you have any thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it really depends on what the item is. There's multiple times where we've done a partial release on an item and now we're trying to reseal that bag. And so you walk past that thing every day, but this particular day you notice that it looks a little different. When you start looking at it, maybe it was just opened in a separate area to accommodate the partial release, or maybe the package fell off of a shelf. Let's say it's leaning up against another item that's at an angle. I mean, there's a lot of different things that would happen, but I would say definitely don't ignore it. Just take a deeper look at it and see if there's a reasonable explanation for it.
All right, now we're officially done. You can leave, but I am finding a couple more questions here. Why can't you put metallic items into polytubing? Because metallic items rust. Now I should say ferrous items with iron content in them more specifically. You could probably put platinum in polytubing. Any metal. Let me go back. Now that this is the after show, uh, metallic items that are subject to rust or oxidization. That's probably a better thing to say.
Yeah.
Maybe not all metallic items. I mean, you could probably put tinfoil inside of a polytubing and it's going to do just fine. You could probably put gold, which doesn't oxidize the same way that steel does. Really what we're trying to avoid is any item that could possibly rust or corrode. It's going to rust or corrode. Polytubing is going to accelerate the rust growth and corrosion of that item because of the moisture content that's trapped inside the bag, because there's no place to go. Um, it's a rust factory. So that's probably a better answer. So, but thank y'all for
Yes.
being here. Uh, Thank you for being here, James. James was actually working earlier today and he was able to hop in.
Hey, my pleasure.
Next week, oh, we didn't get to next week. Next week is not next week. Next on tax day. The next episode of the Evidence Show is live from Huntington Beach. James is going to
Yes.
be live at the Huntington Beach Police Department, which is in beautiful Southern California. He will be there and we will take a walk through their room and see some of the cool things that they do. And we will get an idea of how things work in SoCal. And that will prepare us for our visit to Corona for teaching a class there. Um, all of our episodes are broadcast at 2 p.m. Central. Here are the next dates for the Evidence Show: April 15th, May 20th, June 24th, and June 22nd. Some of those dates may change. just based on class scheduling. If James and I are able to get to a training class, then we will definitely probably have to move some of those around, but we will let you know ahead of time. Couple things we're going to be talking about. We're going to take you to the gun show in a future episode. We're going to go live to SoCal. We hope to call one of our episodes Viva Las Vegas, because we're trying to get to Vegas for a show. We'll talk about digital evidence disposition, and then things that we wish our young officers understood. Those are some of the topics we're working on. Thank you for being here. I'm going to take this hat off. And for those of you that are new, I've got plenty of hair, and I look very young, very fit. But for those of you that have been here for a while, you know better. So thanks for attending, and
keep
we'll
those
see you next
questions
time.
coming through on the Facebook evidence management site too. Appreciate
Absolutely.
those questions.
All right, I'm going to end this if I can figure out how. Thank you, James.
Right.
Thanks for being here, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a great day.